Tonight we travel nowhere farther than London and St. Mary Mead. A fall, a note, a brown coat, no one noticed except her. Invites listeners to guess before Miss Marple does. Soft teacup clink fade. London. Grey morning. A thin mist hanging over the street lamps. Inside the underground, footsteps echoed. A steady hum of trains. Announcements swallowed by static. Miss Marple never liked London stations. Too many faces moving at once. Too much hurry. Not enough noticing. But she noticed. She always did. Across the platform, a man waited. Brown suit. Neat shoes. Hat pulled low. He checked his watch twice, then looked toward the tunnel. A second man appeared. Taller. Nervous. Clutching a small briefcase. They did not speak, yet they watched one another. Then, a sound. A metallic clatter. Someone gasped. The man in brown took one step forward and vanished beneath the train. Screams. Brakes screeching. The air filled with burnt metal and that sharp electric scent. Ozone. Miss Marple stood still. Most people turned away. She did not. A man was already pushing through the crowd. "Doctor," someone called, but he was too quick. Far too quick. He reached the body before the guard. Kneeled, checked the pulse, then whispered something too low to hear. His coat brushed the rail. His hand trembled, but his face stayed calm. Marple's eyes narrowed. Doctors do not arrive on schedule. They are summoned. Police tape fluttered. The doctor rose, nodded briskly, and walked off without giving his name. No one stopped him. No one even asked. Moments later, a porter found a slip of paper near the track. Numbers smeared by soot. 17,122 kelvins. He handed it to an inspector, who looked baffled. A meaningless code, they said. File it and move on. By noon, the evening edition printed the story. Accident at Hyde Park Corner. Miss Marple read it over tea. Steam curled from the cup. She traced the numbers with her finger. 17. 122. K. Not a date. Not a street. Too deliberate for chance. She folded the paper neatly beside her saucer. Something about it whispered deceit. The phrase, "medical aid rendered immediately," stood out. How could aid be immediate unless someone expected the fall? Marple set down her cup, pulled her notebook closer. Her pencil tapped once, twice, 3 times. Her mind began sorting what others missed. A man falls. A doctor appears too soon. A code left behind. No identification. And a smell. Ozone. Coal dust. Perfume, perhaps. A woman's scent where no woman stood. Coincidences do not repeat in tidy order. They pattern themselves into motive. She rose, adjusted her shawl, and spoke quietly to herself. Someone planned that fall. Someone practiced being a witness. Outside, the bells of St. Mary Mead struck 12. A new train roared through the tunnel miles away. London moved on, but she had already begun counting. The doctor who signed the station report did not exist. His name and his license number were both false. Morning in St. Mary Mead. Soft drizzle against the window. The clock struck 9. Miss Marple sat by the fire, knitting quietly. The rhythm of needles kept her thoughts steady. Click, pause, click. Her cat, Pounce, slept near the hearth, tail twitching. The newspaper lay folded beside her teacup. She unfolded it again, eyes tracing the column. Accident at Hyde Park Corner. A man in a brown suit. Unidentified. Doctor on scene. Death instantaneous. Nothing unusual, they said. But Miss Marple felt the tug in her mind, that small, stubborn thread that never let go. She sipped her tea. Too bitter. Too long steeped. She didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on a single sentence. Police commend the quick action of a doctor who arrived immediately. Immediately. Her lips tightened. No one arrives immediately, not in London traffic. Not unless he knew what was coming. She reached for her notebook, wrote 3 lines. Doctor appears first, paper with numbers. Brown suit equals deliberate. Her needles clicked faster. When Miss Marple thought, she knitted. When she knew, she stopped. Now she stopped. A knock. Her neighbour, Mrs. Price Ridgway, bustled in talkative, breathless. Terrible, Jane. That poor man in London. Fell straight on the line. Marple nodded, eyes calm. Yes, quite dreadful. They say a doctor was on hand. Mrs. Price Ridgway sighed. So fortunate. Or convenient, Marple murmured. The neighbour blinked. What's that? Nothing, dear. Sugar? The chatter went on. Garden gossip, choir arrangements. But Marple's mind stayed with the fall. When Mrs. Price Ridgway finally left, silence returned. Marple unfolded the paper again. Numbers printed faintly in the photograph's caption. 17,122 kelvins. The same code mentioned in the brief report. Why print a code in a newspaper? Unless the editor didn't see it. Unless it wasn't meant for him. She turned the page. Another column. Murder at Marlow. Woman found strangled. Same day. Different county. A coincidence? No. Coincidences cluster around guilt. She cut both articles neatly with sewing scissors, placed them side by side on the table. Same typeface. Same hour printed at the top corner. One accident. One murder. And between them a silence shaped like a plan. She looked up at the mantel clock. Tick, 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 tick. The cat stirred. The rain softened. Marple whispered. 2 deaths. Same day. One man too quick. One woman too late. She reached for a clean page in her notebook, underlined the word doctor, then circled it twice. Something about his timing was rehearsed. Something about that note wasn't random. She folded the clippings inside her pattern book, her private filing cabinet. Next to the wool skein, safe and warm. Her eyes moved to the window, where the drizzle turned to steady rain. Smell of damp wool and ink. The next morning's post brought a letter addressed to her bearing the same smudged handwriting as the paper from the rails. The letter came by first post. Brown envelope. No return name. The writing tilted, hurried but neat. Inside 2 lines. If you want the truth of the fall, ask at the mill house, Marlow. No signature, just a faint scent of jasmine. Miss Marple set down her cup. Her cat's ears twitched. The rain outside had stopped. The world felt paused. She packed her knitting bag, slipped the clipping inside. By noon she was on the train to Marlow. The rhythm of the wheels steadied her thoughts. Patterns, always patterns. At Marlow, Inspector Slack met her. He wasn't pleased to see her. He never was. Officially closed case, Miss Marple. Robbery. 1 dead. No mystery. She smiled. Then humour me, Inspector. Robberies rarely end with perfume. The mill house stood beyond the bridge stone walls, ivy curling up the sides. A constable waited at the gate. Inside, the air was stale. Cold fireplace. Curtains drawn. The faint trace of jasmine again. The victim was a woman, young, dark-haired, still beautiful even in death. The doctor's report said strangulation. No valuables missing. Slack shrugged. Maybe a quarrel. Love affair. Gone wrong. Marple's eyes moved across the room. To the ash tray on the table. Half a film canister, charred at the edge. She bent closer. Metal smelled sharp, acrid. Not ash from tobacco. From chemicals. Not a smoker, she murmured. Slack frowned. What's that? Nothing. Just noticing what isn't here. She touched the curtains, newly washed. But one corner stained faintly grey. Coal dust. The same dust from the underground report. Inspector, she said softly. You mentioned robbery. What exactly was taken? Jewelry box, he said. Empty? Nothing but a photograph inside. Of a man in a brown suit. Marple's gaze lifted slowly. Did anyone recognize him? No, ma'am. Might have been a friend. Or a target. She asked to see the garden. Damp soil. Footprints near the side door, 2 sets. One smaller, deeper heel. A woman's shoe. And beside it, a longer step, dragging slightly. Like someone pulling weight. She measured the stride with her cane. The distance was odd. Precise. Practiced. Not panic. Not surprise. Someone had carried the body out. Then back in. "Inspector," she said quietly, "your robbery started outside and ended inside. Someone changed their plan halfway." Slack sighed. "Always plans with you, Miss Marple." She smiled faintly. "Always, Inspector." She looked again toward the river. It shimmered dull under the grey sky. A mill wheel turned slowly, water sighing against the wood. The same rhythm as her knitting, slow, certain, inevitable. Smell of wet stone and jasmine. She looked back toward the darkened doorway. "Whoever wrote that letter," she said softly, "wanted me to see this house before it's cleaned." She turned to Slack. "Seal the chimney. There's more smoke in this case than ash." That night when they opened the flue, they found a strip of cloth brown wool stitched with women's thread and still warm to the touch. Evening settled over St. Mary Mead. The lamplight flickered softly on Miss Marple's writing desk. In front of her, the charred film canister from Marlowe, sealed in brown paper. Inspector Slack had allowed her to observe it. He called it harmless. She knew better. She fetched her magnifying glass. The rim of the canister gleamed dull, not photographic metal at all. Scratched faintly along the edge were numbers barely there. 17, 122 kelvins. The same code, the same handwriting. A match too perfect to dismiss. She turned the canister slowly. It rattled once. Something inside. Not film. Something heavier. She slipped a knitting needle into the lip, twisted carefully. The lid gave with a sigh. Inside 3 small stones, dull under lamplight. She touched one with the tip of her finger. Cold, smooth. When the light hit it, white fire. Diamonds. Rough cut, unpolished, but unmistakable. Marple exhaled quietly. Then she smiled, one of those rare, private smiles that meant everything just rearranged itself. So, a man dies in a London station. A woman strangled at Marlowe. Both linked by a code, a scent, and a handful of hidden diamonds. She wrote a line in her notebook. The canister is message, not treasure. A message to whom? She examined the paper, wrapping again. The glue smelt faintly of eucalyptus. Foreign, not English manufacture. Perhaps South African. Perhaps a warning from someone abroad. She made tea. Boiling water hissed, calm and ordinary. That steadiness always cleared her mind. If the canister carried diamonds, it meant trade. If it carried a code, it meant conspiracy. Both together meant murder wasn't personal. It was business. Her mind retraced each clue. The false doctor, the brown suit, the note, the woman. All parts of a single plan, but one piece missing the delivery point. She unfolded the Paddington Gazette. An advertisement circled faintly in pencil. Room 17, locker 122, Paddington Station, Kilmorden & Co. Freight Collection. 17, 122, K. Her breath caught. Not a code, an address. She stood. Shawl tightened round her shoulders. Outside, wind pressed against the window pane. The village clock struck 10. She jotted a note for the morning. Paddington Station. Locker 122. Inspector Slack optional. The cat blinked from the hearth, tail curling. Marple reached down, stroked its fur absently. Soft, warm, the opposite of the cold stones in her palm. She packed the canister back into its paper. Tomorrow she would see the locker. Tonight she would think about the man who wore brown wool stitched by a woman's hand. She blew out the lamp. The house fell into quiet, faint scent of burnt paper and eucalyptus glue. At dawn, the canister was gone. Only the torn wrapping remained, and on the table, written in coal dust, one word, peddler. Morning trains hissed through Paddington. Crowds pressed forward, eyes glazed with hurry. Steam coiled above the platforms like ghosts waiting for direction. Miss Marple never looked hurried. She moved with that quiet confidence that makes even station guards step aside. A handbag in one hand, knitting bag in the other. Simple. Ordinary. Invisible. She studied the locker map near the wall. Rows of numbers. Neat columns. Her finger stopped at one. 122. Bottom row. Near pillar 17. Exactly as she expected. She paused beside it. A young clerk swept past. Another man in a brown overcoat waited near the kiosk, pretending to read the paper, too still for comfort. She felt the prick of instinct, same as when someone miscounts the teaspoons at church. She turned the key Inspector Slack had provided. It fit, but only half. The lock had been forced recently. Dust around the rim disturbed. Someone had been here first. She pressed gently. The door swung open. Inside nothing. No canister, no paper. Just a torn corner of a brown envelope. Her eyes narrowed. On it, a faint stamp mark. Peddler & Co., Freight and Colonial Imports. Sir Eustace Peddler, the name from the coal, dust message. An MP with trading ties. A gentleman collector of art and, apparently, diamonds. Marple folded the paper carefully. A faint whiff of oil and tobacco clung to it, warm grease and stale cigar smoke. Behind her, footsteps slowed. The man with the newspaper lingered. She adjusted her scarf, pretending not to notice, watched him in the reflection of the locker door. His paper was upside down. She closed the locker softly, leaving it unlocked. If he followed, better to let him think she'd missed something. She moved away, slow, deliberate. The man waited 5 seconds, then stepped forward. He opened the locker, reached inside, and frowned. Empty. He left quickly, melting into the crowd. Marple smiled faintly. Always test the watcher before you test the clue. She found a quiet seat near the telegraph office and wrote a note. Inspector Slack Peddler, Colonial Imports. Locker forced. Follow quietly. She folded it in half, handed it to a porter she trusted, and waited. 10 minutes later, Slack arrived, irritated as usual. "What are we doing here, Miss Marple? This isn't a knitting circle." She gestured toward the locker. "It's where thieves send letters they can't post." Slack frowned. "And what's the address?" She met his eyes. "Marlow, the mill house." He blinked. "That place again?" "Always the same place, Inspector," she said softly, "because the guilty rarely change hiding spots, only names." They walked toward the exit, the crowd swallowing them both. Somewhere behind, a whistle blew. A new train arrived. A suitcase fell open. Jewels glittered inside, then disappeared as quickly as they'd appeared. Marple turned once. The man in brown was watching from the opposite platform. When Slack rushed back to seize him, the coat lay folded neatly on the bench, still warm, but the man was gone. Afternoon rain softened the noise of London. Cabs hissed across wet streets. Miss Marple's umbrella tilted slightly forward, the way she always carried it when thinking. Sir Eustace Peddler's townhouse stood behind black iron gates, white columns, brass nameplate polished daily. Respectable. Too respectable. A servant opened the door before she could knock. "Lady Bantry sent me," Marple said pleasantly. The servant hesitated, saw her calm smile, and led her in. The hallway smelled of polish and cigar smoke. Oil paintings lined the wall. African landscapes, railway bridges, diamonds mined. From sunlight, Peddler liked to display his profits. He entered a moment later, tall, silver-haired, voice smooth as cream. "Miss Marple, is it? What can I possibly do for St. Mary Mead's finest detective?" She smiled. "Oh, nothing at all, Sir Eustace. Only conversation. I dislike puzzles left unfinished." He laughed too easily. People who lie often sound delighted. They talked of weather, Parliament, travel. Marple's eyes wandered while he spoke. A brown coat hung near the door. Buttons sewn with small uneven stitches. Women's stitches. "You travel often?" she asked. "Trade, mostly. Colonial matters." "Diamonds, perhaps?" He paused for a breath too long. "Only investments, my dear lady." She nodded. Her knitting needles clicked softly inside her bag. Though she wasn't knitting, she was listening to the rhythm of guilt. He poured her tea himself. The saucer rattled slightly. Unsteady hands. Clever men forget to act calm when pouring milk. From the adjoining room came the faint hum of typewriter keys. A woman's voice murmured, then stopped. "Your secretary?" "Miss Pettigrew. Efficient creature." "Would she have been at Marlow by any chance?" Peddler smiled. I've never heard of the place. Miss Marple folded her napkin slowly. Curious. The freight company using your name stored a parcel in Paddington. Same initials, same handwriting. Diamonds inside. For a moment, silence stretched thin. Only the clock ticked. Then he laughed again. How imaginative you village ladies are. She rose. I find imagination unnecessary when people repeat their own stories word for word. It's the sign of rehearsal, not truth. He stepped closer. You've no proof. Not yet, she said softly. Only a pattern, and patterns never stay hidden long. The servant returned with her umbrella. She thanked him, glanced once more at the brown coat. Its sleeves were damp. The day's rain had not yet reached this street. Outside, the air smelled of wet pavement and cigar smoke, the same mix from Paddington. She looked back. Through the curtain, Sir Eustace watched her leave. She whispered to herself, when liars watch you go, it's because they fear you'll come back. Smell of cigar smoke and wet wool. That night, in her notebook, she underlined one sentence twice. Sir Eustace Peddler was not at Marlow, but his coat was. The next morning, London was washed clean by rain. Miss Marple arrived at Sir Eustace's office precisely at 10. The brass plate on the door gleamed. Peddler & Co., Colonial Imports. She carried a small parcel in her gloved hands. Inside were the ash from the mill-house fireplace and the scrap from the locker. Both evidence. Both quiet. A clerk led her to a waiting room lined with maps of Africa and shipping routes. Trade routes. Smuggling routes, if one read them differently. Miss Pettigrew entered a moment later. Younger than expected. Fair hair, pale hands, and a cautious smile. Sir Eustace is in conference, Miss Marple. Can I be of any help? Marple returned the smile. I do hope so, my dear. You were mentioned in the housekeeper's report at Marlow. A flicker, not fear memory. Miss Pettigrew's hand froze on the doorknob. I've never been to Marlow. Of course not, Marple said gently. Then it must be another Miss Pettigrew who posted a package from that station last week. The girl blinked. Her cheeks coloured suddenly. A pale rose against her skin. The reaction Miss Marple had been waiting for. She opened her handbag, produced the torn envelope stamped Peddler & Co. You seal your letters with eucalyptus glue, do you not? An unusual choice for London. Miss Pettigrew swallowed. Her eyes darted to the corridor. He prefers it, she whispered. Sir Eustace says it lasts longer in humid air. Ah, said Marple. Humidity. So inconvenient for diamonds. The girl's face drained of colour. She sat down abruptly, hands trembling. I only typed what he told me. I never asked questions. Nor should you, said Marple kindly. But I do. I ask quite a lot. Pettigrew looked up, tears threatening. He said it was political work. Freight records, that's all. But there was one package that frightened me. Frightened you? Yes. He made me post it myself. Told me never to mention the name on the slip carton. The name fell into place like a puzzle piece sliding home. Carton, the man from the station. Marple's tone stayed gentle. Did you ever see the contents? No, but the box was too heavy for papers. Marple nodded. She'd seen the same weight once before in an iron canister. Miss Pettigrew, you've been very brave, she said softly. Now you must be careful. He will notice your blush before he notices the truth. A shadow crossed the frosted glass. Sir Eustace's voice echoed faintly through the door. Is she still here? Pettigrew looked terrified. Marple touched her hand lightly. Say nothing. Simply tell him I came about knitting wool. Men forget small things when they're worried about large ones. She left quietly, walking past the polished hallway. The scent of jasmine trailed faintly Pettigrew's perfume. Not from innocence, from fear. Faint smell of eucalyptus glue and jasmine perfume. Outside, rain had started again, light and persistent. Marple opened her umbrella, whispering, Secretaries don't blush for guilt. They blush for loyalty. And loyalty, when misused, always stains red. That evening, Inspector Slack arrived at her cottage with news Miss Pettigrew was missing, and her typewriter ribbon had been torn clean away. Night settled thick over St. Mary Mead, rain ticking softly against the glass. Miss Marple sat near the fire, notebook open, tea forgotten. On the table lay what Inspector Slack had delivered earlier that evening, a small black diary, recovered from Miss Pettigrew's desk. The ribbon still torn, pages smudged with ink and something else, fear, pressed into paper. She turned the first page. Neat handwriting. Daily notes. Appointments. Errands. Dictations. Nothing unusual. But then her eyes caught a faint dot beneath certain words. Tiny pinpoints, like the end of a needle. Almost invisible unless the light struck right. Marple shifted the lamp closer. There it was again. Dot under meeting. Dot under shipment. Dot under Tuesday. Her pulse quickened, but her voice stayed calm. Coded text, she murmured. Old trick. 1 dot for truth, 2 for danger. She turned another page. Each dotted entry matched a date from the newspaper clippings: the fall at Hyde Park Corner, the murder at Marlow, each event tied to a simple line of ink. She copied the dotted words onto her pad. Tuesday, shipment, Marlow, delivery, 17, 122, K. It wasn't a diary, it was a ledger, a record of movement. Not goods, but people. Someone had kept score. The cat stretched near the fire. The sound of rain thickened outside. Marple's hand trembled slightly as she lifted the page corners. 1 page missing, ripped clean. She stared at the thread of paper left behind. Rough, torn with haste. The last word before the tear. Peddler. She exhaled slowly. So the pattern was complete. The fall. The woman. The locker. The freight. And now the name that stitched them all together. Her eyes moved to the inside cover. A date written faintly in pencil. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Tomorrow. And beneath it 3 letters, written upside down. Car. She frowned. Not initials. An abbreviation. Church Road. She whispered the words aloud. Church Road. Delivery tomorrow. That was why Miss Pettigrew had vanished. She knew too much and too early. Tomorrow would be the next exchange. The same pattern, same hour, new target. Marple stood, moving carefully to the cabinet by the wall. She took out her small torch and her gloves. Her reflection in the window looked back at her older, slower, but not uncertain. Wisdom had its own speed. The clock chimed 9. The wind pressed against the shutters. She marked the diary page with a red thread and placed it inside her knitting bag. The next stitch in this case would be made outdoors, smell of damp ink and old paper. She blew out the lamp. The room slipped into quiet shadow, her voice barely above a whisper. If a diary records lies, the spaces between the dots tell the truth. At dawn, the diary was gone from her table, replaced by a note in the same small handwriting. The meeting moves to Church Road tonight. Dusk settled fast. Wind pushed low clouds over the village roofs. Church bells rang the half-hour. Each chime felt colder than the last. Miss Marple walked quietly along Church Road, her shawl drawn close. No umbrella, no handbag, only her knitting bag, though it held no yarn tonight. She had told no one she was coming, not even Inspector Slack. He would have insisted on uniformed men, and uniformed men frightened guilt into silence. The meeting place sat at the far end, an abandoned mission hall. Boarded windows, dusty pews, a single gas lamp flickering by the side door. She pressed her gloved hand to the wood. Warm, someone inside. She waited, counting quietly. Footsteps. 2 sets. A door hinge creaked, then voices low, sharp. Male. Familiar. She leaned closer. The shipment leaves tomorrow, one said. The diamonds go with it. The other replied. If the woman talks, she dies before morning. Marple's breath caught. The second voice smooth, confident Sir Eustace Pedlar. She moved a little nearer, careful not to touch the gravel. The door's crack showed faint light. 2 men inside. The shorter one wearing the brown suit. The taller one signing papers. A thin line of smoke curled through the air. Cigars again. Same smell as the townhouse. The shorter man lifted a small parcel wrapped in brown cloth. "I'll keep it till the train," he muttered. Peddler nodded. "If anyone asks, it's medical supplies. The girl's disappearance has complicated things." Marple's hand tightened around the doorframe. She had no weapon, only logic, and the one advantage criminals never expect: an old woman who listens more than she speaks. A floorboard groaned beneath her shoe. Both men turned sharply. Light spilled toward the doorway. "Who's there?" She stepped back into the shadow, silent. The gas lamp flickered. The wind answered for her. Peddler cursed. "Check outside." The man in the brown suit stepped out. Marple flattened herself against the side wall. The man paused, eyes scanning the path. Too close. She could smell his coat, wet wool and tobacco. Her knitting needles clinked softly in the bag. He turned his head. "Cat," he muttered, then went back inside. She waited for their footsteps to fade, then crept to the open door. Inside, papers littered the table. She took one, folded it without reading. A ledger sheet marked in the same small dots. Shipment, Tuesday. Locker 122. She looked toward the back pew. Another movement, a shadow behind the altar. A woman's silhouette, bound and gagged. Miss Pettigrew, alive. Marple hurried forward, cutting the rope with a knitting needle. "Quiet, my dear," she whispered. Pettigrew's eyes filled with tears. "They're going to meet at the siding near the church. Tonight." Marple helped her up. "We'll need the inspector now," she said softly. "But first let's leave before the devil finishes his prayers." They slipped out into the rain. Behind them, the mission bell creaked once in the wind, as if the church itself disapproved, smell of cigar smoke and wet dust. As they reached the Macet road, a carriage blocked their path inside it. Sir Eustace Peddler smiled through the rain and said, "Going somewhere, Miss Marple?" Rain hammered the lane. Carriage lamps glowed like trapped fireflies. Sir Eustace leaned from the window, smiling too easily. "Come now, Miss Marple," he said. "You'll catch your death in this weather." Miss Pettigrew's breath shook beside her. Marple straightened slowly. Her voice was calm. "Thank you, Sir Eustace, but we were just leaving." He laughed. "Indeed. I insist you ride with us. Dangerous times to be walking alone." Two men stepped down from the carriage, silent, gloved, brown coats. No conversation. Orders already given. Marple touched Pettigrew's arm lightly. "Do keep your scarf on, dear," she whispered. Then louder, "We wouldn't want a chill." They climbed in. Inside smelled of leather and cigar smoke. Peddler sat opposite, cane resting across his knees. Rain streaked the glass. Hooves clattered against wet cobblestone. Miss Pettigrew stared at her hands. Her pulse throbbed visibly in her throat. Peddler spoke easily, his tone almost kind. "You must forgive my theatrics, Miss Marple. One can't be too careful when politics and property intertwine." "Diamonds, you mean?" Marple said. He chuckled. "Ah, you really are remarkable. But I'm afraid curiosity will cost you dearly." The carriage turned sharply into a narrow road. She recognized the sound of gravel under wheels. The train siding near the church, just as Pettigrew had said. Peddler tapped his cane twice. The men outside halted the horses. He looked at Marple with a faint sigh. "An unfortunate business. If only you'd stayed in your little village." Her knitting bag sat on her lap. She opened it slowly. Not wool inside, just the folded ledger page she'd taken. The one marked shipment. Tuesday. Locker 122. "Looking for this?" she asked softly. His eyes flashed. "You?" "Have no idea what that paper means." "Oh, but I do," she said. "Which is why you'll soon have a visitor who wants it even more." He frowned. "What visitor?" "The one who reads dots." Before he could answer, the carriage jolted. A whistle blew close by. A train approaching the siding. Peddler turned toward the window, and in that second, Marple acted. She slipped the folded page into Pettigrew's pocket and replaced it with a blank sheet she'd written earlier. Same shape, same fold. Substitution complete. No one noticed. Peddler leaned back, smiling. "Very well, Miss Marple. I'll take that paper now." She handed him the decoy, eyes calm, He opened it, saw the lines of dots, and relaxed, satisfied too quickly. The train thundered past, drowning the sound of his triumph. When it faded, Marple spoke gently. "Forgive me, Sir Eustace, but I fear your code's been mistranslated." He looked down. Instead of figures, the dots formed a sentence. "Truth travels faster than greed." His face blanched. He struck the carriage wall with his cane. The tip broke. A hollow sound. Empty. Smell of wet leather and iron. Marple's eyes moved to the broken cane. She saw something glitter faintly inside the hollow. Diamonds. The carriage door flew open. Inspector Slack stood in the rain, revolver raised. "Step out, Sir Eustace. The train brought your telegram and your warrant." The storm broke before dawn, lightning over the hills, rain still whispering through the gutters of St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple hadn't slept. The night's events turned over in her mind like puzzle pieces searching for fit. Sir Eustace under arrest, his cane hollow, diamonds hidden, and yet too neat, too easy. Truth never arrives wrapped in one package. It travels by post, one letter at a time. A knock sounded at the cottage door, soft, hesitant. When she opened it, a young woman stood there, soaked to the skin. Anne Bedingfeld, the girl from the newspaper photograph. "Miss Marple?" "Yes, my dear. Come in before you melt." Anne clutched her coat tighter. "I think someone followed me." Her voice shook, but her eyes didn't. Determined, frightened, and brave all at once. Marple poured tea. Steam rose, curling between them. Smell of damp wool and strong Assam. Anne began to talk. Fast at first, then slower as trust settled. She'd been at Hyde Park Corner that morning. She'd seen the man in brown fall. And she'd seen the doctor, Sir Eustace's man, arrive before anyone else. "I picked up the paper he dropped," Anne said. "It had the code 17122K. I tried to tell the police." They laughed. Marple nodded gently. "And after that, I went to Marlow, to the mill house. I thought it was connected." Her voice dropped. "There was a woman there, dead. I panicked and ran. Someone followed me for days after." Marple watched her face, guilt mixed with exhaustion. "You were meant to find the body, weren't you?" Anne looked startled. "Yes. But how?" "Because whoever planned this needed a witness who looked innocent. A young woman, alone. You became the story they wanted printed." Anne stared into her cup. "They said I was involved, that I'd met the man, but I didn't even know his name." "Carton," Marple said softly. "The man in brown. A diamond sorter. He knew Peddler's secret trade." Anne nodded slowly. "He was scared. He tried to reach someone called Harry. Said if anything happened, the diamonds would be traced through freight papers." Marple's knitting needles rested on the table, motionless. "Then Sir Eustace killed him," she said. Anne whispered, "Yes, or ordered it done." Outside, thunder rolled again. Marple stood, drew the curtain aside. A man waited at the gate. Umbrella, dark coat, not slack, too still. Anne saw him too. "That's him. The one who followed me." Marple's mind moved quickly. The girl was bait again, whether she knew it or not. And if Peddler was in custody, someone else had taken his place. "The Colonel," she murmured, "the one who never signs his name." She blew out the candle, whispering, "Stay low, Anne. They've come for what you saw, not for you." A knock echoed again 3 times this time, and a man's voice called softly, "Miss Marple. Message from Inspector Slack." But Slack was still at the station. The cottage was dark except for one lamp. Rain tapped the window in restless rhythm. Anne stood near the door, breath shallow. Miss Marple held the poker, calm but alert. The man outside waited. No movement, no second knock, only patience, the kind that belongs to professionals, not neighbors. Marple moved first. She nodded toward the back door. "Quietly, my dear." Anne obeyed, bare feet on the carpet. They slipped into the pantry. The smell of tea leaves and damp stone filled the air. A shadow crossed the curtain in the front room. Then the latch turned. Slow, careful, not forced-picked. Marple whispered, "Let him come in. Some truths only walk through open doors." The man entered. Dark coat, wet brim hat. His shoes made no sound on the rug. He went straight to the fireplace, bent down, and reached under the mantelpiece. Searching. Marple stepped out. Her voice soft, polite. "You're looking in the wrong place." He froze, turned slowly, face pale, eyes sharp. "Miss Marple, you shouldn't interfere." "I rarely do," she said. "I simply correct the order of things." Anne gasped. She knew that voice. It was the same man from the mill house, the supposed doctor. He smiled thinly. Carton had to die. He was a thief. Marple shook her head. "No, he was your conscience, and you silenced him." The man reached into his coat. A small pistol gleamed dull in the lamplight. Anne stepped back, trembling. Marple did not move. Her tone stayed level. "Guns are so loud in a small cottage. The neighbors will come running." He hesitated. That pause, small, fatal, was all she needed. From outside, boots struck gravel. Inspector Slack burst in through the kitchen door, revolver drawn. "Drop it!" The man turned, fired once. Slack ducked. The bullet lodged in the beam above the mantel. Smoke, sharp and bitter, filled the room. 2 more officers followed, wrestling the intruder to the floor. He struggled, snarling, "You'll never stop it. The colonel will replace us all." Slack cuffed him. "Tell that to the judge." Anne sank into the chair. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. Marple poured her tea again, steady as ever. "Now, my dear," she said softly, "we begin at the beginning." They examined the items taken from his pockets, papers, coded receipts, a broken cufflink shaped like a crown. Inside the lining of his coat, 3 more uncut diamonds. Anne stared. Carton wasn't the thief. "No," Marple said. "He was the courier. Peddler was the buyer. And this man, the cleaner." Slack frowned. "The cleaner? The one who erases mistakes," Marple replied. "And there's one mistake he couldn't erase: the name Colonel, written in Carton's diary." Outside, the rain began to fade. Morning light slipped through the curtains, soft and cold. Smell of gun smoke and wet tea leaves. Marple looked at Anne. "Keep that name in mind. It's the shadow behind every diamond in this affair." Slack looked down at the papers, each stamped with the same red seal. "CR. Church Road," he muttered. Marple corrected softly. "No, Inspector. Colonel Race." Wind tore across the fields. Branches snapped. The river churned dark beneath the bridge. Miss Marple held her lantern steady, the beam trembling against the rain. Inspector Slack followed behind, boots sinking in the mud. Anne kept close, her shawl drawn tight. The mill house loomed ahead, silent, windowless, abandoned. But the air carried movement, the kind that hides in corners and waits. "Why here again?" Slack muttered. Marple didn't look back. "Because guilt repeats its footsteps, Inspector, especially when it's lost something valuable." The front door creaked open with a push. Dust and damp air spilled out. The scent of coal and old jasmine still lingered, faint smell of burnt perfume and wet wood. Inside, the rooms looked untouched since their last visit. Furniture shrouded, curtains drawn, yet footprints marked the dust, fresh, large, deliberate. Anne pointed. "Those weren't there before." "No," Marple said. "And they lead to the study." They followed the prints down the narrow hall. A candle burned faintly inside, newly lit. Someone had been here within the hour. Slack raised his revolver. Marple motioned him back. "Quiet now. Listen before you frighten the truth away." A scraping sound, wood on stone, then silence. She moved closer, lantern lifted. The hearthrug was folded back. Beneath it, a square outline cut into the floorboards. "Trapdoor," she murmured. Slack knelt, pried it open. A hollow compartment. Inside ashes, bits of wire, and a metal clasp engraved with CR. He looked up. "Colonel Race again." Marple examined the ashes. not all burnt. Edges of paper survived, words barely visible. Shipment received. Church Road cleared. Transfer under Pettigrew. Anne's voice shook. Transfer? He used her. Marple nodded slowly. She delivered his orders, not knowing their cost. A gust of wind rattled the shutters. The candle flickered, then died. Darkness closed in. Slack cursed softly. Marple relit the lantern. Its beam caught something glinting near the far wall, a small brass key wedged between the boards. She lifted it carefully. Locker 122, she said. The one at Paddington. Anne's eyes widened. Then the diamonds were moved again. Marple finished. Hidden here while Peddler ran the meetings. But someone came back tonight to clean what was left. Footsteps echoed above them, light, quick, retreating. Slack turned. Someone's still here. He rushed up the stairs. Marple caught Anne's arm. Stay close. Fear makes us careless. A door slammed overhead, then the shatter of glass. By the time they reached the landing, the attic window swung open. Rain blew in hard. Below in the garden, a shadow fled toward the riverbank. Slack fired once. Miss Marple only watched. Don't, she said softly. He's running toward what he buried. They followed the beam of the lantern down the slope, mud slick beneath their feet. At the water's edge, half submerged in reeds, lay a suitcase, its lock broken. Marple brushed the mud away. Inside, glints of stone caught the light. Rough diamonds. Slack turned to call for backup, but Marple was staring at the bridge where another lantern flickered once, twice, and went out. He's still here, she whispered. And he knows we are too. The lantern beam wavered across the bridge. Rain hissed against the stones. Somewhere in the dark a man breathed. Quiet, measured, waiting. Inspector Slack raised his revolver. Stay behind me. Miss Marple didn't move. Guns make noise, Inspector. Truth prefers silence. They crossed the bridge slowly. Mud sucked at their boots. The reeds along the bank rustled once, then stilled. Anne gripped her shawl tighter, her voice a whisper. He's watching us. Yes, Marple said softly. And he's clever enough to know when to run. A flash of brown moved beyond the hedgerow. Just a sleeve, then gone. Slack charged forward. Stop. No answer. Only the steady drum of rain. They found the brown coat moments later, caught on a bramble, sleeve torn. Still warm. Still breathing the scent of its owner tobacco and soap and something chemical beneath it. Damp wool and sharp disinfectant. Marple touched the fabric. Not Peddler's, she said. Too coarse, too small. This one's local. Slack frowned. Another accomplice? Marple's eyes narrowed. Or a substitute. She turned the collar. Inside, a tag half ripped away. Letters faint but readable. Dr. Seaton. Carton, she murmured. The dead man's coat. Anne stared. Then who was the man at the station? Marple's gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the bridge. Someone who wanted us to think Carton died. Slack swore under his breath. Then who's in the river? No one now, she said. The real Carton's been missing since the theft began. The man who fell was wearing his name. A rustle behind them. Anne turned, startled. A figure stood near the path, hat low, face shadowed. Stay where you are, Slack shouted. But the man didn't run. He stepped forward into the light. Harry Lucas, alias Rayburn. Alias, the man in the brown suit. Marple's hand tightened on the lantern handle. She'd read of him once, an officer gone missing after the war. Linked to the De Beers theft, vanished without trial. He raised both hands. I'm not your enemy, he said quietly. Carton was my friend. I came to clear his name. Slack scoffed. Convenient timing. Lucas ignored him. He looked at Marple. You found what Peddler left, but the Colonel's still alive. Marple's voice was low, firm. Then start explaining before the river washes your story away. He knelt, opened a waterproof pouch at his belt. Inside papers, coded letters, a list of freight shipments marked with small dots. Same handwriting as Pettigrew's diary. They forced her, Lucas said. She copied Peddler's cipher for the Colonel, They used Carton to move the diamonds. When he wanted out, they staged his death. Marple's eyes flickered toward the torn coat. Then who was the body? Lucas met her gaze. Another courier. The colonel leaves no loose ends. Slack lowered his revolver slowly. The night seemed to hold its breath. Marple whispered. Then we're standing on his next loose end. A shot cracked through the rain. The lantern shattered. When light returned, Harry Lucas was gone, and the brown coat lay empty on the bridge. Morning fog swallowed the platform. Trains idled like beasts in their sleep. Steam hissed between the tracks. Everything smelled of coal and old metal. Miss Marple stood near the ticket window, small and patient. Her eyes missed nothing. Inspector Slack waited farther down, hat low, revolver hidden under his coat. Anne stood beside the parcel office, pretending to read a timetable. A trap works best when the bait looks harmless. And Anne looked tired enough to be harmless. Locker 122 stood open now, empty, cleaned, ready. Marple had replaced the missing canister with a copy. Inside it, blank stones, river pebbles polished by her own hand. At exactly 9, a train whistled in from London. Fog rolled thick through the hall. 3 men stepped off. 2 porters, one in a brown suit. Slack tensed. Marple didn't move. "Patience, Inspector," she murmured. "Watch who looks first, not who moves first." The man in brown didn't rush. He checked his watch, lit a cigarette, and leaned against the pillar near the locker. Another man approached the same shadow from the bridge. Hat low, gloves spotless. He opened the locker without a key, took the canister, nodded once to the man in brown, then both turned toward the exit. "Now," Slack whispered. Officers stepped forward from both ends of the platform. The taller man froze. The brown-suited one ran. Marple called, "Leave him. The tall one matters." Slack understood too late. The taller man turned, smiling, faintly, removed his hat. "Sir Eustace Pedler." "How charming," he said. "Even in custody you underestimate me." Slack's revolver lifted. Pedler held up the canister like a prize. "You think I'd carry the real one?" He threw it onto the rails. It burst open, pebbles scattering in the steam. Pedler laughed once, sharp and hollow. "Always a step behind, Miss Marple." She stepped closer, her tone calm. "And yet you're still here, Sir Eustace. The truly free never gloat." His smile faltered. Behind him, the fog thinned. A figure stood there, Harry Lucas, bruised, coat torn. Pedler spun. Lucas struck him once, clean. The cane clattered to the floor. Marple kicked it aside. Its end split open, real diamonds spilled across the platform. Slack's men closed in. Pedler fell to his knees, staring at the stones like they might save him. "They were never yours," Marple said quietly. "They belonged to the dead, and you kept killing to keep them shining." Slack cuffed him, muttering, "Can't believe this. We searched that cane already." Marple smiled faintly. "Only the outside, Inspector. Evil hides best in things that look useful." Anne exhaled, trembling. Lucas nodded once to Marple. "We're done?" She looked toward the tracks, where the pebbles glistened beside the diamonds. Almost. The colonel still breathed somewhere, steam and coal smoke mixed with perfume. A train whistle shrieked. Slack turned away for just a second. When the steam cleared, Pedler was gone. Only the broken cane lay on the ground. Marple bent down, saw a scrap of paper beneath it, 3 letters written in black ink. "C.R." She whispered. "Colonel Race moves next." Night returned thick and windless. Paddington Station stood half empty now, echoing with the memory of morning chaos. The diamonds were in police hands. Sir Eustace Pedler was gone, and the initials C.R. had finally found their meaning. Miss Marple sat, alone in the inspector's office, knitting untouched beside her tea. Slack paced behind her. "Colonel Race," he muttered. "Government man, war hero, trusted in half of Whitehall. You're saying he ran the diamond ring?" "I'm saying," she replied softly, "he ran the silence around it." Slack stopped. "Meaning?" "Meaning some people kill for greed, others kill for secrecy. Both call it service." She lifted a telegram just arrived from Scotland Yard. Its message brief. Colonel Race leaving for Cape Town aboard Midnight Express. Slack cursed. He's running. Marple shook her head. He's finishing what Pedler began. They reached the train minutes before departure. Steam curled from beneath the wheels. Fog drifted through the arches like slow breath. Smell of hot iron and damp paper tickets. Marple walked with deliberate calm. She moved through the carriages, eyes scanning faces. Travellers half asleep. Clerks reading. One man stood alone by the rear platform, grey coat, hat low. He turned slightly when she approached. "Miss Marple," he said, voice measured. "I wondered when logic would bring you here." "Good evening, Colonel," she said politely. "I thought you preferred Africa." He smiled faintly. "Duty travels fast these days." "And murder travels faster," she replied. Race sighed. Pedler overreached himself. "I kept things tidy. War left me with tools, smugglers, couriers, thieves. Why waste them? Diamonds bought intelligence. And killed honest people," she said. He shrugged. "The price of information. The world isn't solved by conscience." She stepped closer, eyes steady. "Then you've mistaken conscience for weakness. It's the only thing that outlives the lies." The train jolted. Steam roared past the window. Slack appeared behind her, revolver drawn. "Colonel Race, you're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and theft." Race didn't flinch. He opened his case slowly. Inside papers, codes, and one final diamond. He held it up between two fingers. "Evidence, Inspector. But whose?" Marple's tone stayed even. "Carton's, I think. The man you drowned in London's noise." He looked at her with something almost like admiration. "You'd have made a fine intelligence officer, Miss Marple." "Perhaps," she said. "But I prefer the company of the living." He turned toward the open carriage door. "Then stay with them." He jumped. A flash of movement, a cry, and the train ground to a halt. Slack ran forward. Below the track, the colonel lay twisted beneath the wheels, the final diamond crushed to dust beside him. Marple closed her eyes briefly. "Justice," she murmured. "Never hurries, but it never forgets." Slack looked shaken. "So that's it, then?" She shook her head. "No, Inspector. That's the end of theft. But guilt will keep on talking long after trains stop running." Outside, in the fog, a shadow picked up the crushed diamond dust and whispered. He wasn't the only colonel. Morning light touched the hedges of St. Mary Mead. Kettle whistled softly on the stove. Miss Marple poured 2 cups of tea, one for herself, one left steaming for memory's sake. Inspector Slack had gone. Anne slept at the vicarage. The diamonds lay locked in London evidence, their brilliance dulled by truth. Marple sat back, knitting half-finished in her lap. "Evil rarely wears black," she whispered. "It prefers brown, something ordinary. Warmth of tea and faint jasmine from the garden." Outside, the clock chimed noon. She smiled. "Another kettle will boil tomorrow, and another quiet crime will whisper through St. Mary Mead."